Good morning, committee. We're going to go ahead and get started. We do have enough members here for a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and begin today's agenda. The first item on the agenda, are there any bill introductions this morning? Representative Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would request the introduction of RS 1586, a bill dealing with the criteria applicable to water right change applications filed pursuant to KSA 82A 706B.
All right, thank you, committee. Is there a motion to accept the bill introduction? Motion by Representative Carlin, seconded by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, bill's introduced. Thank you. Any further bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and open the hearing on House Bill 2277, and that is concerning state agencies relating to the Employee Award and Recognition Program, authorizing hiring, recruitment, and retention bonuses, and increasing the limitation on such award or bonus to $10,000, and eliminating the Secretary of Administration's authority to adopt rules and regulations, and requiring such secretary to submit an annual report to certain legislative committees concerning such awards and bonuses. So giving us a briefing on House Bill 2277 is Jill Walters from the Revisor's Office. Jill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Currently under 75-37-105, that establishes an employee award and recognition program. The program authorizes monetary or non-monetary awards, and a non-monetary award could be a medal, an award luncheon, or public recognition by you as the House or members of the Senate. And it can be made to a state employee by the appointing authority for distinguished accomplishments, meritorious service, innovations, Kansas quality management, volunteerism, or length of service. The monetary award is capped at $3,500 annually for the distinguished accomplishment meritorious service category, or there's also an employee suggestion program where you could offer a suggestion, and if it was adopted by the agency, and it would be for reasons of increased efficiency or other savings, you would be allowed 10% of the cost reduction at a cap of $5,000. So if your idea saved millions, you would still be capped at $5,000 under the statute. What this bill does, it authorizes the amount of the monetary award to go up to $10,000, and just for the purposes of the memo and the bill, it makes no changes to the employee suggestion program. So how I've explained it is how it still remains under the bill. There's no changes to the employee suggestion program. This is only the monetary bonus program. Under the bill, such awards in excess of $3,500 would have to be approved by the governor, and they can't be paid until approved by the governor. And this provision doesn't apply to the legislative or judicial branch employees, because these, although as a legislative employees and judicial branch employees, we are unclassified, our salary is not approved by the governor. So this $3,500, between $3,500 and $10,000 approved by the governor, that doesn't apply to us if there would be a award given or granted to us. I want to further go back and say the bill expands the award program to authorize an appointing authority to grant a hiring, recruitment, or retention bonus. So, just for example, if somebody had been doing a great job at their job in the executive branch, they could be given a hiring or retention bonus if they were doing a great job, or you wanted to hire somebody and to recruit them, you could give them this sort of bonus. So the bill further, the Department of the Department of Administration currently does not have any rules and regs for the program and doesn't see any need for them. Therefore, the bill repeals the authority to adopt rules and regs. The Secretary of Administration has oversight of the program, and the bill clarifies that the oversight is for the executive branch agency and appointed councils and commission only. And this oversight is to provide consistency in the program as well as ensure objective decision-making procedures. Under current law, a person elected or appointed is not allowed to receive a monetary award under the program, but the bill removes an appointed person, and therefore, under the bill, an appointed person would be allowed to receive a monetary award. Finally, the bill requires each state agency to annually, on August 1st, submit to the Secretary of Administration the number of monetary awards paid in each category of awards and bonuses, and then the total amount paid statewide in that year. And then at the beginning of the session, the Secretary of Administration will compile all those reports that were turned into him or her on August 1st and would present them to you on the House Appropriations Committee as well as the Committee on Senate Ways and Means. The bill becomes effective on the statute book. I didn't put this in the memo, but I might point out there's two times in the bill that we strike references to the IRS code and a discretionary bonus, and we are striking this because those procedures would not allow us to, or those rules in the federal code would not allow us to implement the provisions of the bill as going forward, so that's why we had to strike those provisions. I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Committee, are there any questions for Jill? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. So the first proponent that I have in regards to House Bill 2277 is Samir Arif, the Director of Public Affairs for the Department of Administration. Samir?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to appear to offer our support for 2277. I won't reiterate the things that Jill just mentioned that are in the contents of the bill. Really, the genesis of this bill was we had heard from a number of different state agencies about some of their challenges with recruiting and retention. Recruiting and retention bonuses are pretty common in the private sector. I figured we could offer one more tool to agencies to be able to recruit and retain employees. As Jill mentioned, increases the cap from 3,500 to 10,000. It's a more sort of significant cap to be able to offer meaningful recruiting and retention bonuses. Of course, the oversight will be with the Division of Budget, Division of Personnel, and the Governor's Office all be required to sign off on these bonuses. In addition, the Secretary of Administration would compile a report from each of the agencies that offer bonuses in the previous year, and we would present that to the two budget committees at the beginning of every session. So one important note, in FY24, there will be no fiscal effect. Agencies will have to offer their bonuses within their current budget resources, but there might be a chance, depending on how successful their recruiting efforts are in future years, they may ask for additional enhancements. So Craig Knowlton, Director of Personnel Services, is here as well to answer questions, but we figured that some of the agency's testimony might be a little bit more impactful to talk about some of the needs that this could help address. So I have Secretary Izmuda from Corrections, Deputy Secretary Bruner from KDADS, and CTO Jeff Maxson from OITS, but I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Committee, are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Next, we do have Secretary Jeff Zamuda from the Kansas Department of Corrections. Secretary Zamuda.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly address the committee on the importance of HB 2277 and the potential impact on our workforce and our operations in our Kansas correctional facilities. Again, this bill would permit agencies with appropriate approval and oversight to implement a program to pay hiring, recruitment, and retention bonuses for up to $10,000, and this ability to do that would make us more competitive in the labor market. Current statute does not provide for the purposes of hiring, recruitment, or retention, and we're limited to $3,500. And Joe referenced earlier how the current statute allows for funds to be given for bonuses. Our agency continues to experience critical staffing shortages that impact public safety and safety in our correctional facilities. We're certainly not alone in our workforce challenges. Just about every business is experiencing some form of labor shortage. We have 563 vacancies across our uniformed and non-uniformed workforce in our facilities, which comprises 17% of our workforce, or our 3,364 employees. And we currently have uniform staff vacancy rates at or above 25% at 6 of our 9 correctional facilities, and those would be Ellsworth, El Dorado, Lansing, Larned, Norton, and our juvenile facility here in Topeka. As a result of those vacancies, we've spent approximately $11.5 million on overtime so far this fiscal year, and we're projected to spend about $16.6 million on overtime costs by the end of the fiscal year. As a point of reference, the cost to hire and train each individual new uniformed correctional officer is about $14,875. That includes wages during their training and overtime costs for other staff to work that post that new officer would normally fill. House Bill 2277 would provide us the option to pay bonuses as an additional tool to compete in this labor market. And with the passing of HB 2277, and with that greater flexibility and ability to use bonuses for the purpose of recruitment and retention, I would envision focusing on these areas. New hires, establish a bonus paid primarily upon hire and then periodically throughout the first months or years of a new employee's employment with us. Referrals, our current employees are our best marketers and best recruiters. Having some form of a referral bonus would encourage them to refer their acquaintances, their friends, their family members to our organization for employment. Retention, establish some form of a retention to incentivize our staff to stay with the organization and retain that experience that can only be gained by being on the job. And then supervisory, create an environment that promotes our supervisors to help create the very best environment possible to help keep workers with us. We've provided to the committee a few examples from some other DOCs, Nebraska and Colorado, and Clark County, Washington Jail. A few examples of what they're doing in terms of bonuses. They're just a few examples of what's going on out there nationally in the correction space. We believe that bonuses have become somewhat commonplace in corrections, perhaps even expected by applicants as part of a competitive compensation packages. Adding bonuses as an option to our already available strategies will not by themselves help solve our workforce needs, but when paired with the governor's recommended pay plan, proposed legislation that would improve the retirement benefits of our employees, and our continued efforts to make our employment opportunities the best in the state, we believe we can be more competitive in the market. I urge you to pass House Bill 2277 this session, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any questions for the Secretary? Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know, does current policy at Department of Corrections allow you to pay relocation expenses if you make someone move from one location to another?
Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, or Representative Francis. Yeah, we do that through the Department of Administration. There is an opportunity to pay a relocation fee.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the Secretary? All right, seeing none, thank you again for being here. Next, we have Scott Bruner, the Deputy Secretary for Hospitals and Facilities for the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Scott Bruner. I'm the Deputy Secretary at KDADS for Hospitals and Facilities, and I'm representing our 4 state hospitals today to give proponent testimony for House Bill 2277. Try not to repeat many of the things that the Secretary just mentioned, but the state hospitals at Larned, Osawatomie, Parsons, and KNI here in Topeka all used the existing state employee reward and recognition program during the COVID pandemic to pay out meritorious service awards for employees during the pandemic. Early on in April of 2020, our Secretary designated every state hospital employee as essential and as a healthcare worker, which meant that they had to continue working in person on campus through that early stage of the pandemic. That was at a time when other state employees had the option of working from home or working more flexible schedules. So our employees at the state hospitals, because of the nature of the work that we do with patients, residents, and as a 24/7 facility, needed to continue working on campus. We tried to find ways to recognize employees for that risk and danger and the additional service that they had to provide, additional hours they had to work, and the employee reward and recognition program that Jill described in the bill was the tool that we had. Over 4 different time periods between 2020 and 2021, we used the recognition program to pay out bonuses to state employees at state hospitals. These were times when we had active COVID cases either on the campus or in the communities around our campuses, and several of those times we had COVID relief funds available to pay those expenses. One of the issues that this bill addresses that the bonuses are capped under the current statute at $3,500 per year, and as we did those 4 different rounds over different time periods, one of the upper limits we had to face was as employees we're applied an hourly bonus for hours worked on campus as those bonuses, but we had some employees that worked so many hours, their regular shifts and overtime, that we easily hit that cap. And so we had employees that either weren't eligible or they got the full $3,500, but we couldn't go to the full amount that they were eligible for based on the methodology that we used. So House Bill 2277 would lift that cap as one example of the dollar amount, raising that to $10,000, which would have allowed us to pay more of the bonuses that folks were eligible for. There was one other unique circumstance that happened during the pandemic with the 24/7 pay plan that you all adopted last year. For salaried employees, there was a $3,500 bonus attached to that pay plan. Because we'd already paid out a bonus under our proposal, salaried employees at the state hospitals they received the full $3,500, but they didn't get the $3,500 from the 24/7 pay plan, just as another example of where the $10,000 cap or a higher cap than $3,500 would have given us some additional flexibility. House Bill 2277 also provides additional justifications for incentives, including hiring, recruitment, and retention. All 4 of our state hospitals have historically high employee vacancy rates. I've talked about this with this committee before and the Social Services Budget Committee. I don't want to belabor that. I did attach to the testimony a couple of charts that show both the number of employee vacancies in our direct care positions and the percentage that represents. And so at Larned State Hospital, for example, in our safety and security, our mental health disability technician, direct care positions, and nursing, we're at close to 60% vacant positions in those categories. And things have helped along the way. The 24/7 pay plan, the COLA that was in the governor's budget and in the budget you approved last year certainly helped. And we took some direct actions working with the Department of Administration on MHDD salaries last year. That certainly helped kind of stem the flow, but we haven't made a lot of progress from last year on those vacancy rates. The other issue we have at Larned and Osawatomie in particular is the use of agency staff to supplement our nursing and clinical care positions. Those agency staff do provide valuable service, help us keep the doors open, but they're 2 to 3 times more expensive than hiring a state employee to do the equivalent work. So we're optimistic that with House Bill 2277, we'd have some of those additional tools, recruitment bonuses, retention bonuses, to help us kind of work back on some of that overtime and contract staffing costs by filling positions. We do think that needs to be targeted. Much like Secretary Zmuda said, we'd focus on nurses and direct care staff to really address where our vacancies are, and that's a similar situation for facilities like ours that provide direct care to patients, including the veterans' homes and state hospitals. We think that's the area to focus on. Mr. Chairman, the last comment I would make is about recruiting and some of the competitive nature of the hiring environment that we're in. We've put a lot of effort into recruiting, trying different things, directly outreaching through licensing boards to say, if you have a social work license in Kansas, come work at a state hospital. That's helped. It's been somewhat successful, but as we recruit those positions, nurses, social workers, licensed psychologists and therapists. That market is extremely competitive for the few folks that are available, and we know that in recruiting social worker, psychologist positions like that, they have the opportunity to receive hiring bonuses or other kinds of incentives from other employers. So having that tool available to the state hospitals, at least, I don't know, it puts it on a level playing field, but at least gives us another tool that's certainly out in the market that's not allowed under current state statute. So, Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2277 would help state agencies be more competitive as an employer, has very reasonable controls on agency spending and oversight, and we think that'll help the state employee bonus and incentive programs meet the intended goals of retaining and recruiting new employees, and we'd encourage your support for House Bill 2277. And I'm happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Committee, are there any questions for Scott? All right, seeing none, thank you again for being here. Committee, you will find in your packet that we also have proponent testimony that is written from Amber Schultz, the Secretary of Labor, Laura Howard from the Secretary of Kansas Department of Children and Families, and Calvin Reed, the Aging Secretary for the Kansas Department of Transportation, acting Secretary for the Kansas Department of Transportation. I am not showing any further proponent testimony, so there's anybody else, now's your chance. And if not, we're going to move on to opponent testimony. I do not show anybody that is wanting to provide opponent testimony. Neutral testimony, we have Susan Guile, the Executive Director of the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts, and that is written. And we also have Jeff Maxon, the Interim Executive Branch Chief Information Technology Officer. If there's anybody that wants to supply neutral testimony, here's your chance. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2277. Next, we're going to open the hearing on House Bill 2449, which is providing that all members of statutory boards and commissions who are authorized by statute to receive compensation and shall receive the amount of per diem of compensation that is actually paid to legislators. So to give us a briefing on House Bill 2449, I would invite Jill back. Jill.
Hello again. Currently, pursuant to 753212 and 753232, members of statutory boards or commissions are paid per diem compensation of $35 each day for actual attendance at meetings. Now, there are some outlier exceptions to that say if you attend these boards, you get paid what a legislator does, but generally, the boards and commissions gets paid $35. And I think there's 4 that also by statute get paid like a little more, but nobody gets paid over $100 a day to attend. So what this bill would do is it would just make everybody who is coming to a meeting who is a member of a board or commission, they're allowed to be paid the equal amount paid to legislators pursuant to 46137A, and what that amount currently is set out, as you I'm sure are all aware, is $88.66 a day. And I just wanted to clarify, but this bill does not change mileage or subsistence allowance rates. So this is only the per diem compensation that board members get per day for attending a meeting. And I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jill. And I would probably like to add that this is actually a discussion item that we had on the State Employee Compensation and Benefits Special Interim Committee in trying to equalize the amount that the individuals that serve on boards and commissions are paid, because there is varying amounts in statute in regards to that. And there's also been requests to have an increase, and this is just to equalize all boards and commissions to have the same pay and per diem rate. Obviously, we're going to have that on Thursday. If you've looked on what we're going to be discussing this week, we're going to have the briefing on the Special Committee on State Employee and Board Member Compensation. Are there any questions for Jill? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jill, I just wanted to verify. I don't see it here. Oh, never mind. Sorry. No. I'll stop breathing instead. I wanted to make sure that the Board of Tax Appeals was not included in this policy change, or this funding change.
No, sir. They are a fully salaried board who receives, I believe they receive what a district court judge is paid.
And-
So yeah,
and-
that would not change them.
And I will add, that is one that we did exclude.
Sure.
Just for
I
the
just
fact
didn't
that
see
we
it, that's
changed the name a few years ago from the Court of Tax Appeals to the Board of Tax Appeals. So they did fall under the classification of a board, but they, as Jill mentioned, they are a salaried position, so we did exclude them.
Okay, I just didn't see it in the bill, was the problem.
It's,
Jill?
if I may, sir, Representative said it's in their statute, sir, in their 79 statute where they're created.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I quickly looked through the bill. I couldn't see if it was, if the bill specifically said 8866 or if it's tied to legislative pay. And with the movement that's underfoot to change legislative pay, would that then in turn change this?
Jill?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Mason, we would need to, if that bill would pass, we would need to have the discussion of the legislature of what you would like, because it is set in in 46-137A, that $88.66 amount is set. And so if that raised per the Compensation Commission bill, then we would definitely need to have a discussion about what legislative intent is, what you want them to earn.
Representative Mason? Good? Okay. Any further questions for Jill? All right, seeing none? Thank you. And I am not showing anybody that is wanting to be a proponent or an opponent. So if you would like to supply proponent or opponent testimony, here's your chance. The only neutral testimony that I do have for House Bill 2449 is from Susan Guile, the Executive Director of the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. If there's nobody else that wishes to supply neutral testimony, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2449. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on to an informational hearing. I think this is something that many of us have been hearing since the beginning of session, and that is the Kansas Health Sciences Education Center, also referred to as the Wichita Biomedical Campus. So here we're going to have an informational hearing on exactly what that is going to entail. And so I would invite Dr. Richard Muma, the president from Wichita State University. Dr. Muma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. It's great to see you all and be here today. You have at your desk this document here. I wanted to point out some of the items on that as I talk through a few things today. I know you have a lot of requests and priorities to narrow down, but wanted to talk about the funding of the Health Science Education Center in Wichita. What could be the most consequential project you could fund for the future of the state. As a healthcare provider myself, I've been trained in the largest health science center in the world, Texas Medical Center in Houston. And when I arrived in Wichita 27 years ago, I thought we had a gap in how we provide coordinated care to the Wichita community and the surrounding rural region. Every major city of Wichita size or larger has something like this at its core. Working with KU now more than 4 years, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone the fact that two universities are coming together. We think we can do this better together and more efficiently. 4 years ago, we started planning how we could come together to make this happen, building a space for KU's School of Medicine in Wichita, their School of Pharmacy in Wichita, WSU's College of Health Professions that has 7 different departments in it, and WSU Tech's entry-level health programs. And not do this separately, as that obviously hasn't worked along the way. We know working together will improve outcomes for patients, provide more opportunities to grow the talent pipeline, which means increasing the number of clinicians in several fields of study, develop new programs, and ultimately improve overall patient outcomes. This infrastructure is missing, and that's what we're trying to do in Wichita, provide that infrastructure that will also attract further investment in the biosciences in the core of the city and for the region and the rural region, which will benefit the entire state. In fact, this campus and the KU campus in Kansas City, more than 90% of Kansas can be served within 100 miles radius of each other. Several years ago, Wichita did a study with members of our community, the Blueprint for Regional Economic Growth, or BREG. You're probably familiar with that. And we identified 7 clusters: aerospace, agriculture, IT, advanced manufacturing, oil and gas, healthcare, and transportation. And we've invested to maximize the impact of new technologies in all those areas except healthcare. This investment will send a strong message to our community and state and to the businesses that we care about their healthcare so they won't think about leaving, but also attract other businesses to Kansas. This is the final step in the investment that we need. We performed a preliminary economic impact study recently and found conservatively that this project will generate over 1,000 new jobs and provide $100 million of economic activity annually. We've seen this in every city that we've studied and in every community that's growing. The molecular diagnostic COVID lab that we stood up at the beginning of COVID, the Innovation Campus, both of these at WSU are two good examples of what can happen when you invest in infrastructure. And we'll need your support for this. So just to recap, this is a $300 million project as that document that you have before you. Last year you gave us $35 million to kickstart it, $25 million jointly with KU, and $10 million to WSU. And we need $225 million to start it. So that's another $190 million that's needed from the legislature. And we'll raise the rest of it, about $70 million between the two institutions to get it over the finish line. So I just want to make sure you understand this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. We know moving into this post-COVID environment, which the available dollars from the federal government, the ARPA dollars, are meant for challenging us to think about doing things differently, which this definitely does, to work collaboratively to help grow the Kansas economy. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Muma. I guess the first question that I would have is, can you elaborate on the partnership between Wichita State University and the University of Kansas in providing this medical center? A little bit more.
Yeah, so I'll let my colleague come up here in just a second, Dr. Samari, who's the Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs at KU in Wichita. He and I started talking about how we could come together jointly to do this. We have all kinds of things that we could share in providing education, simulation labs, clinical sites, a host of other things that right now we're duplicating, spending a lot of time and effort on. And this is meant to come together and truly develop a partnership where we're educating individuals together, sharing resources, really for the benefit of patient care and a true interprofessional team. Right now we're fragmented all over this south central area of Kansas. So it's meant to address that. And we know if you do that, you're going to improve patient outcomes, you're going to develop new programs, you're going to spark new ideas, new research, new opportunities to grow the economy.
So you mentioned that this is a $300 million project between the two institutions. And I will say there are some funds available that we've been looking at, but it's not $300 million.
Yeah.
So what is the approach as for Wichita State University, and maybe I'll ask this for Dr. Samari in regards to the University of Kansas, in fundraising or trying to get dollars to hit that $300 million mark?
Yeah, so we have a joint Sparks proposal still before the legislature that's part of it. We believe that there's other resources that will be available locally with the county and the city. We've talked to Commerce, U.S. Commerce Department. We think there's availability of resources there to help get this over the finish line, and then raising money privately to do this. That's going to be a challenge, the private aspect of this. We've been trying to do that for years. But we believe that this, if the legislature helps in this effort, that we'll be able to spark some interest among private donors to help get it over the finish line.
Do you anticipate the need for bonding authority?
Well, it depends on how we get funding through this project. If it's one-time funds that we're requesting the $190 million, I don't think so. We'll be able to start the project. If it's, $7-10 million each over a period of time, then yes, we would have to bond it.
And then my final question, actually, we've been talking about the location of the facility, and on the information that we have right before us is showing it in downtown Wichita.
Yeah.
There's been discussion about having it elsewhere, so can you, I guess, diffuse the idea that it might be not in the downtown area of Wichita?
Well, when you look at other health science centers around the country, they're usually in the urban core of a community, the city. The idea is to make it in that area of downtown Wichita, somewhere in that area, as you see that shaded area. They'll help with services to people in the community. It won't be on one side of town versus the other. We've talked about the east side of town. We've talked about the Innovation Campus. Other locations around the community, it really makes sense. There's a developing, or is a DO school in downtown Wichita. We just opened up a culinary school in downtown Wichita. There's parking, there's infrastructure, there's housing in that area. As the 3,000 students who will be a part of this, and 200 or 300 faculty staff will be a part of this. It makes the most sense for that to be located there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Muma. Representative Helgerson.
Very much. You made reference to an economic analysis study that showed that it would be, $100 million economic impact every year?
Yeah, annually, yeah.
I have not seen that, and I didn't see it on your website. Can you provide that to committee?
We can. I believe there's a link on the website, but we can provide that to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Also, I didn't see anything about operating costs. How is that going to be handled?
Well, I'll just speak from Wichita State's perspective. We already have the operation of the current College of Health Professions covered. And we're moving that facility to this new location. So we're not asking for any additional dollars, but we also have 2 of our programs in lease space downtown and Old Town. That lease will cease to won't be needed anymore, and so we can use those funds that we're paying on that lease if there's any additional costs that we haven't thought about, which there's always things that come along the way.
Does the economic analysis show the operating costs and what will be saved and what additional costs, moving costs, et cetera? I can't believe that that the 2 universities are going to come together and say, we're going to put a $300 million facility together, and we're not going to cost you any operating costs.
Yeah, I don't believe that particular study addresses that, but we can provide the information for you.
Final question, if I might.
You may.
You don't need our authority to do anything for the bonding authority. You could go on your own, can't you? If the 2 universities decided to do this, you could take what money there is and bond the rest, correct?
Well, we would still need an investment to cover the cost of the bond service and the debt service of that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again. I think one of the things that kind of gets confused with this with folks because of all the different things that we're talking about of what might be happening from the medical perspective in Wichita. We have the mental health hospital, which is not a part of this, which is a separate discussion. And correct me anytime I misspeak, but the yellow shading, that is trying to bring all of our fragmented services around the city for those with mental health and other needs and put them kind of in one corridor so that you have, available transportation, the buses. We also have the Lord Diners that's down there that serves over 600 plus people every night, a dinner. And then people also forget, and they miss this piece, I think sometimes when we talk about this, is the KU Medical School will be incorporated within this building.
Yes.
So it would move from its current location. It gives the resident students then the opportunity to have places to walk to, restaurants, bars, stores, et cetera, which current location, they don't have that. It's kind of isolated. It's in a neighborhood. You don't walk anywhere in that neighborhood. So it's I see it, once we pull all these pieces together, I could actually see Wichita recreating one of my topics that I'm very heavy in, which is mental health, is that we could almost start recreating what we used to have with Meningers. And we would also be able to do that, I think, on other medical fields. Like they said, they're going to be getting innovative, because I think that what WSU has done and then what KU brings to the table, it's going to be like a powerhouse in health care. We can't look at it as just one type. It's going to be health care, period. So I hope that kind of helps a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for Dr. Muma? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. We'll go ahead and I'll ask for Dr. Robert Samari, the Vice Chancellor for the University of Kansas Medical Center. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to share a few comments from the KUMC perspective and perhaps a little bit more of an update. The Medical Center campus in Wichita is really essential to meet the needs of the mission of the university and the state. And since 2010, 2011, it includes a 4-year School of Medicine and a School of Pharmacy. Now, the other two campuses, Kansas City and Salina, have state-of-the-art facilities that allow for interdisciplinary education of health professionals. But the Wichita campus, because of its isolation, does not have that currently. And so for years, we've discussed a joint health campus with our colleagues at Wichita State. And the plan in front of you will enable, for the first time, really interdisciplinary education on the Wichita campus that will create students that are better trained to meet the needs of the healthcare of the state of Kansas. Now, one of the things that's unique about this opportunity for the School of Medicine is that about 50 students have to transfer from Kansas City to Wichita at the end of the third year. By creating this new interdisciplinary campus, it's our intent to bring those students to Wichita from day one of their education and to keep them for 4 years in Wichita. What that will do is that will create a more dedication to the Wichita Southeast Kansas community among those students, furthering their our hopes that they stay in the area after graduation. So just a bit of an update. Last year, with support from the Kansas Health Foundation, the two universities and Wichita State Tech engaged an architect to do some preliminary programming that has resulted in this $300 million project estimate. And with through state processes, we've already selected architects for the project that are from Los Angeles and Helix from the state of Kansas. So we are excited about this. We think this is, as Dr. Muma said, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change the face of healthcare education in the state of Kansas, and we look forward to answering further questions and your support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Dr. Samari. Any questions for Dr. Samari? All right, seeing none? Thank you for being here. And I would also like to address the committee that this is going to be a discussion item that we're probably going to have at omnibus. So that's the reason why we wanted to have an informational hearing, so we can have the details of the partnership between Wichita State University and the University of Kansas in regards to this facility in the Wichita area. So that's going to be for the discussion. Well, we were going to move on to the budget report out by Chairman Howe in regards to higher education budget. However, he is absent from the committee right now. So we will be at ease for just a while, just a second. I see that Chairman Howe has entered the room again. So we'll go ahead and move on to the budget report out with the higher education budget for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. I would like to preface that there is some information that is omitted from the budget report. We are anticipating that we will have the corrected information shortly. So until we have that information, Representative Howe, if you could explain if there's any the omissions on the budget report out, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. So Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, please refer to the Budget Analysis Volume 2, page number 945 through 981. This is the post-secondary education system-wide budget analysis. The agencies submit a revised estimate of $3.6 billion, including $1.1 billion SGF in fiscal year 2023. This is an increase of $66.1 million, or 1.9% above the approved amount from all funding sources. The expenditure increases are primarily in salaries and wages, contractual services, capital outlay, and other assistance, with partially offsetting decreases in commodities and aid to local units. The major increase in expenditures is in restricted fee funds of $96 million. The governor concurs with the agency's revised estimates in 2023. The House Higher Ed Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation in fiscal year 2023 with the following adjustments. On page 2 of your yellow printout, it says University of Kansas. Add language prohibiting the demolition of Smith Hall at the University of Kansas and prohibiting removal of art from Smith Hall, including a statue of Moses in fiscal year 2023, until the agency submits an updated land use plan for the Lawrence campus to the Board of Regents. Such plan must include intentions for the Smith Hall site. Upon approval by the Board of Regents in a public meeting allowing for public testimony, demolition of Smith Hall may proceed. Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions on the fiscal year 2023 budget for post-secondary education system-wide.
All right, thank you, Chairman Howe. So in regards to the item number 1 from the Budget Committee, I'd like to elaborate on that. As I think everybody knows, is that I'm an alumnus of the University of Kansas, and I know Smith Hall very well. But why was there the move to demolish Smith Hall?
Why was there a move to demolish Smith Hall? I haven't been provided any documentation from the University of Kansas of why that particular space.
I mean, it wasn't a defunct building, correct?
According to the report that Board of Regents had compiled, which graded all of the buildings on campus, I believe it received a B-. I do know that it isn't ADA compliant.
It is not ADA compliant, or it is?
It is not.
It is not. But that, in my opinion, would not be a rationale to demolish a building just because it's not ADA compliant.
Perhaps not. And I think because there's no documentation in the public sphere, it's caused a lot of angst with community stakeholders and things like that. They just don't know what the plan is. And with the only physical representation of the university sealed with the statue of Moses and the burning bush stained glass, I guess, it's very meaningful to a lot of people, both past and present. And so they want an understanding of what the university intends to do with this property.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Howe. Any questions in regards to fiscal year 2023? All right. Seeing none, you may move on to fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agencies request $3.8 billion, including $1.2 billion SGF for fiscal year 2024. This is an increase of $189.9 million, or 5.3% above the fiscal year 2023 revised estimate. This increase is primarily in aid to local units, $95.8 million, and other assistance, $85.5 million, compared to the agency's revised fiscal year 2023 budget. The State General Fund increase is primarily due to an increase of $179.6 million for enhancement requests totaling $253 million. The request includes $20 million joint requests from Wichita State University and the University of Kansas Medical Campus, $850,000 for the HERO Act scholarship, $45 million for facilities capital renewal and demolition, and $78 million for state investment in infrastructure to modernize campuses. The governor's recommendation, the governor recommends $3.6 billion, including $1.1 billion SGF for fiscal year 2024. This is a decrease of $146 million SGF, or 3.9% below the agency's request. The decrease is primarily due to reduced expenditures in aid to local units and other assistance, which is attributable to the governor not recommending most of the enhancements. Now moving on to the House Higher Ed Budget Committee recommendation. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's budget recommendation with the following adjustments for fiscal year 2024. Under the Board of Regents, item number 1, add language requiring items under the post-secondary operating grant account of the State General Fund to be separately appropriated in the bill to each institution for fiscal year 2024, rather than representing with a single item of appropriation for the Board of Regents. Number 2, add language requiring that each Regents institution email a statement to every student regarding free expression for fiscal year 2024 and include such statement in each institution's student code of conduct or student handbook. Number 3, add language prohibiting post-secondary educational institutions from expending funds to require an applicant, employee, student, or contractor to endorse or oppose an ideology, including those of diversity, equity, or inclusion, or to provide statements concerning commitment to such ideologies for fiscal year 2024, unless such expertise is necessary in that person's field. Add further language prohibiting preferential consideration to such persons that provide unsolicited statements concerning these ideologies, unless such expertise is necessary. These prohibitions shall not limit academic freedom relating to teaching, researching, or writing. This language permits compliance with federal and state anti-discrimination laws and allows actions against persons for violation of such law. Each institution shall submit a report to the Director of Legislative Research and the Attorney General regarding compliance. Item number 4. Delete $3.8 million SGF from the Post-Secondary Operating Grant Fund for inflationary expenses at state universities for fiscal year 2024. Item 5. Delete $20 million SGF from the Post-Secondary Education Operating Grant Fund for student financial aid at state universities for fiscal year 2024. Item 6. Add $21.7 million SGF to state universities in Washburn for student financial aid for fiscal year 2024 with the following allocations outlined in bullet points below you. Item number 7. Add $2 million SGF to the state scholarship program for fiscal year 2024. Number 8. Add language for the Kansas Comprehensive Grant that of the $35.3 million SGF appropriated for this scholarship program for fiscal year 2024, no less than $22 $0.5 million is distributed to private and independent institutions, with the remainder to state universities and Washburn. Each institution must provide a $1 for $1 local match from non-state or private monies. Next is the Kansas State University Agricultural Extension. Add 100,000 SGF. The agricultural experiment stations account for the Kansas Mesonet technician for fiscal year 2024. Number 2, review at Omnibus the KSU request for $5 million SGF for the K-State 105 program for fiscal year 2024. University of Kansas, add 1.9 million SGF to the Kansas Geological Survey program for critical program restoration, supporting scientists and software developers for fiscal year 2024. The second item under University of Kansas, add 3.8 million SGF to the Kansas Geological Survey program for capital improvements, including water quality programs and lab facility upgrades for fiscal year 24. Number 3, add language prohibiting the demolition of Smith Hall at the University of Kansas. Similar language as what was in the fiscal year 23 request. Next, University of Kansas Medical Center. Number 1, the Budget Committee requests the House Committee on Appropriations consider adding $5 million SGF to the KU Medical Center for grants to rural hospitals for medical student housing assistant for fiscal year 24. These grants would require a 1-to-1 match from rural hospitals. I will note that is a notation under the University of Kansas Medical Center, only a notation. Next is Emporia State University. Number 1, add 9 million SGF to a newly appropriated Emporia State investment model account for fiscal year 2024. Next is the community and technical colleges. Number 1, add 3.8 million SGF to the career technical education outlay aid, and add language stating that the money is divided equally among the 7 technical colleges and 9 community colleges that are associated with technical education, requiring a local match of non-state monies on a 1-to-1 basis from either the college non-state funds or private donations, including money or equipment. Number 2, add language stating that the agreed upon numbers will be separately appropriated for transparency for fiscal year 24. The Board of Regents will use the 3-year average for post-secondary tiered technical education state aid by determining the amount each community or technical college will receive from such colleges. Enrollment data for academic years 2020, 2021, and 2022. Additionally, a 5% increase is included to assist in rising personnel costs. The formula also includes a partial correction for previous funded status. Number 3, add language stating that the agreed upon numbers will be separately appropriated for transparency in fiscal year 24. The Board of Regents will use a 3-year average for non-tiered course credit hour grant by determining the amount each community or technical college will receive from such colleges. Enrollment data from fiscal year or academic year 2020, 2021, and academic year 2022. Additionally, a 5% increase is included to assist in rising personnel costs. The formula also includes a partial correction for previous funded status. Number 4, add language for tuition for technical education or Excel and CTE, stating that each college eligible for reimbursement receive a 5% increase to cover rising personnel costs in 2024. Number 5, add 10.5 million SGF in operations for technical colleges and Washburn Institute for Technology for fiscal year 2024. Each institution shall submit a report to House Committee on Appropriations and the Senate Committee on Ways and Means by January 8th, 2024 regarding long-term plans to sustain operation cost. And lastly, the last item is private and independent colleges. Add $500,000 SGF for engineering initiatives at private and independent colleges that have a physical presence in Kansas for fiscal year 2024. Add language requiring a 1-for-1 local match from non-state monies or non-state or private funds, and directing that funding only to be used for recruitment and retention of instructional faculty, student aid, internships, and purchasing engineering equipment. Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions in the fiscal year 2024 budget for post-secondary education system-wide.
All right, thank you, Chairman Howe. So, as I mentioned before, there were some omissions in regards to the budget report out in regards to what the Budget Committee had actually deleted. So could you please go through those items since they are not on the report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I am just reviewing this list for kind of my first time, but I will go through those. I believe a copy is being distributed. Mr. Chair, shall I wait till everybody has a copy, or would you like me to proceed?
No, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are items that were in the governor's budget recommendation. Well, some of them were in the governor's budget recommendation. Number one, $4 million from the micro internships. Number two, $541,347 from inflation for Washburn University. Number three, $17,928,602 for mandatory inflationary expenses for state universities. Those would be the regions. Number four, $8.5 million NISS academic playbooks. So far, all of those first four items were in the governor's budget recommendations. Number five, $437,700, ensuring pathways to student success for Washburn. Number six, $5 million continued state investment in cybersecurity. Number seven, $6.5 million for the cybersecurity for the two-year colleges. Number eight, $450,000 Washburn University cybersecurity. Number nine, $6.5 million cybersecurity for two-year colleges from post-secondary operating grant. And 10 through 13 appear to me that these were not in the governor's budget recommendations. These were initially added in our deliberations and then subtracted, deleted. That included $6 million for Fort Hays State University debt retirement, $8 million Emporia State University for their investment model for fiscal year 25, $2.6 million for Community and Technical College Navigator Plan, and $5 million for two-year colleges, community colleges capital outlay.
All right, I believe number 9 was also not included in the governor's budget. Is that correct? Or not recommended by the governor?
That is correct.
All right. All right, thank you for going through that. Since we didn't have that on the report that is in front of all the committee members. The first thing that I would like to ask is in regards to item number 1, we're add language requiring items under the post-secondary operating grant account for SGF to be separately appropriated. And I would say 9 years ago when I was a member on the Appropriations Committee, we did have each institution, and I believe this is what this language does. This would separate each institution outside of the Board of Regents so we could look at each institution's budget. Is that correct?
That is correct. It would make it more transparent in what each institution is receiving under that overall operating grant.
All right. I commend the Budget Committee for having this because, like I said, 9 years ago when I was a member, this is how it was. We would look at each institution separately and not have it completely lumped into the Board of Regents where there was less transparency. And so we could analyze each institution by itself. And so I like item number 1 very much. Again, number 3, I already kind of asked my question in regards to Smith Hall. I would actually oppose the demolition of that particular building. And then item number 2 under the community and technical colleges, and 3. This is just adding language. This is not appropriating any funds. And then also in regards to the 5% increase, that would come from existing funds, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is my understanding. It would come from existing funds.
All right. Okay, thank you. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the committee's work. I do have three amendments here that I'd like to offer, and so hopefully I can do this where everybody kind of understands. The first would be I would subtract the 21.7 million, which is number 6 under the Board of Regents, and then add back in on your white sheet, add back in the 5 million for be number 6, number 7, and number 8. So those cybersecurity, the 5 million for state institutions, the 6.5 million for 2-year colleges, and the 450,000 for Washburn. I would add those back in and subtract number 6. Basically, that's my pay for is number 6, and then I have additional one after that. So that would be my motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, would you explain that again? You want to subtract the 21.7 from 6. That's what, all of that. And then what were the other 3 you wanted to do on the white sheet?
On the white sheet, it would be number 6, number 7, and number 8.
6, 7,
Those were Governor Rex, and of course so was the 21.7. But
so it's 11.
It's kind
so
of
that's 1550.
It's yeah.
And you're subtracting 21.7.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Landwehr. Any further discussion? Representative Helgerson.
Do we have some discussion from the committee about this?
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely think cybersecurity is important, and we had a lengthy discussion about the need for that at the institutions. I think my biggest fear with deleting the 21 million is that we already we deleted the inflation adjustment, which was basically what would hopefully keep tuition either low or flat. Also deleting student financial aid on top of that, I have concerns with rising costs that this is going to lead to a very significant hike in tuition if we delete both student aid as well as the inflation adjustment as well. So I just have concerns for the cost and the potential burden for students.
Yeah, I mean,
Representative Helgerson.
Did the university say anything? What they could expect? What we could expect if that amount wasn't put in?
Representative Woodard.
There was discussion about what low tuition requests we may see with an inflation adjustment. We didn't have a conversation of what that would look like with the deletion of the inflation adjustment, as well as potentially deleting additional student financial aid.
Representative Helgerson.
Is the technology, the cybersecurity one time, or is it annual from now on?
Chairman Howe.
I believe what was in the governor's budget recommendation was one-time spending. And when we were looking at ways that we could bring down our number within our committee, that became, it's hard to determine which ones should be on the chopping block, if you will, because cybersecurity is certainly important. We want to protect the integrity of people's privacy, whether it's faculty and our research or the students and their personal information. So, and I left this context out of my budget report, but basically our overall budget recommendation comes in under the governor's budget recommendation by $74.5 million. So that's kind of where we ended up. but it was not an easy decision to delete cybersecurity because it is very important to the integrity of what they do each and every day. So,
Representative Helgerson.
All right, I agree with you that there is a need to try to keep tuition down. And I'm looking at the original individual that made the motion. Is there any kind of a compromise? I think you're taking 21 million out and putting back 11. And this is a one-time $11 million that's, I guess I have a hard time taking all this out. And I see that this is one-time money that sure could be paid for something else. And I'm looking for some help. Anybody else out there care about what I'm saying?
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, you have to remember that this 21.7 million is different than the inflationary expenses, because the inflationary expenses were money that was going to the universities. The student financial aid would be scholarships. That's my understanding. So as far as, I guess it would be up to the universities whether or not they wanted to increase their tuition, and then these scholarships would go either farther or less, either way. So I will just say that this is just part of my, I've got another motion coming up later that will deal more with the comprehensive grant and might or might not help you a little bit with this 21.7.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the Higher Ed Budget Chair, who is a first-timer, did a pretty good job in navigating all this. While I appreciate the motion, if you have more, as we're looking at this, I'm a little concerned. Is cybersecurity very important? It is, and as those university CEOs came to talk to the committee, it was important. But what we kept hearing on and on and on is the students and his financial aid and scholarship opportunities. And I think as we looked at how to come in under the governor's budget, there were, believe me, we went 3 days. We didn't get it done in an hour and a half. We went about 10 and a half hours getting this done. So these things were not done haphazardly. But when you have to make choices, even though, we would love to stack everything up. And so that's kind of where it is trying, knowing that if we take the inflation dollars that were in there out, tuition is going to go up. But as we look at basically that pool of money, that scholarships probably was the top priority of the university presidents. And I want to speak out of turn, Mr. Chairman Howe, but I believe that's kind of the decision of why. So if you have other things dealing with that, I guess I would be a little concerned of making that shift, and then if you're going to allocate other things, and I appreciate the pay go. So that's, I guess, a little bit other perspective from this side of the room on what would happen during those deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to speak on behalf of saving the 21.7. That's why I wanted a clarification to make sure I understood it. I would agree that the financial aid piece for students are extremely important, not only from the student perspective, but because I do summer orientation, I hear from the parents who are coming that have budgeted for 2 or 3 years just getting ready for their children going to school, and financial aid has been a bigger piece. We know that over 40% of our students work on campus between 12 and 15 hours a week, trying to supplement their money. So many of our students are also independent. They don't have a mom or dad that's helping them do this, and they're not getting outside sources from another state or a trust or anything like that. So when we take the money from them that they are counting on, then we're not helping the student population. And we talk all the time about affordability. Well, they're trying to afford it, and they're working to do that. And yet we're taking away the financial source. Maybe there's something else one can take away, but when you take away from the students, that's what the university is there for. So I would hope we would think in terms of financial aid as making it possible for the parents to help their students, or those students that are independent on their own. And we sort of forget that they don't all have help. So that would be my rationale for why the financial aid. The university, for 4 years, we kept our student flat. And for this year, when they graduated in May, they were there for 4 years, and we never raised that tuition. Now, that was good for them and for family to plan. But if families can't plan on their students getting financial aid, even though they're working, then I don't think we're helping them stay in school.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll just say that if we remind everybody that last year we put $19 million more into the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Scholarship Program, which in a lot of ways is doing the same thing as the student financial aid. So that's my reason why I'm doing this. Now, if I'm going to have an amendment later on the comprehensive grant, and if we want to talk about that more as far as what I'm doing with that. But I think if we're going to put more money into financial aid, let's leave it in this comprehensive grant. It's a needs-based grant. So,
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm a little bit lost, Representative Hoffman. Would you restate your motion for me at this point?
Yeah,
Representative Hoffman.
I'm sorry.
No, you're on.
Yeah. So on the blue sheet, number 6 would be deleted, which is $21.7 million, and then on the white sheet, we would be adding back in 3 items that were in the governor's rec, which is $5 million for continued state investment. Number 7, $6.5 million for the 2-year colleges for cybersecurity, and 8, $450,000 for Washburn cybersecurity. And I'll just say the cybersecurity we've got some issues in our universities, and I don't want to get into them real in depth on a public. In a public meeting, but we've got some real issues that need to be taken care of in some of our cybersecurity problems that we have.
Representative Owens, you good?
Thank you.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most of my stuff has been answered, but I want to hear from the chairman. It looks like they did a lot of deliberation to come up with these numbers for each specific school based off of need, would be my guess. But we're taking all that money and then we're adding 11 back in, but it's probably not going to the same institutions that they targeted. And so I just want to know a little bit more about where the money's going to go and how the chair or how the committee came up with the specific numbers.
Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the question. And so, as you'll see under item 5, under the Board of Regents, there's a deletion there of $20 million. And we did that because Washburn University was not included in the governor's budget recommendation. So to add that back in, and to also add more transparency, we worked with the Kansas Board of Regents to specifically state how much each institution should expect under this additional student financial aid. So that's what is spelled out below in great detail. We didn't want any ambiguity later on, as has occurred prior to my coming to this committee on some other items. And so for transparency's sake, that's what we were looking at. Now, in terms of building the talent pipeline, that is a term that is used at the Kansas Board of Regents. Part of that seeks to provide different pathways for students. Some of these students are first-generation college students. Some of them may be perhaps non-traditional in some way. Some may not be aware of all the opportunities before them because maybe they're a new migrant family that is just, perhaps naturalized, as my sister-in-law did as well. So there's a problem with enrollment. Some of that was before COVID, and some of that was exacerbated by COVID. And we're seeing a little bit of a rebound. And no pun intended, but the University of Kansas has a very large freshman class this year. And perhaps I've heard stories that because of them winning a national championship, some people decided to choose the University of Kansas who had never heard about Lawrence, Kansas before.
That's true.
And so this does create an awareness around the country that, hey, Kansas might be a place, a good quality of life, a place that I can succeed in a welcoming campus environment. So when I see projections about this enrollment cliff that the Kansas Board of Regents has presented our committee, it basically says by the end of this decade, and if I'm misspeaking, I'll ask my ranking member to correct me, but they're expecting a decrease of up to 15% of people attending college, up to 15% decrease, just based off of demographics alone. Other states are facing the same cliff, if you will, enrollment cliff. And so I want to provide our universities with all the tools they need to succeed in getting students to our classrooms. And we have succeeded. Wichita State is doing an excellent job of creating a corridor to the south of them, down through Oklahoma City area, Dallas, Fort Worth, and giving some tuition breaks to them to go to Wichita State, and they've had some growth. Emporia State is eliminating out-of-state tuition for anybody in the lower 48. So they're taking a very aggressive posture. And I feel like the next 5 years is going to make a huge difference in what happens in higher ed here in the state of Kansas. And so this is additional tools to get students in the classroom and to support our communities. And so that's kind of where I come from as a chairman to the committee and why I supported that in our budget deliberations. If my ranking member has anything else to add, I would certainly welcome it.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you for that answer. Before I decide which way to go on this, is your plan to take the other $10 million and add it into the comprehensive grant with your amendment?
Representative Hoffman.
For need-based?
Well, my plan was not the whole 10 million, but if, when we get there, I guess we could have that discussion.
All right, thank you.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to chime in support of the dollars being added for the cybersecurity. This is really a preventive measure. We know that we need to make investments there. And that has been the difficulty in getting CEOs to prioritize and to make that a very top priority in investment. But a breach is very costly. So if we don't spend the dollars up front to do what we need to do to protect our cybersecurity, then we're going to be paying on the back end because breaches are just very, very costly. So anyway, just wanted to chime in support of adding those dollars back in for the cybersecurity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we debate this motion right here, one of the things I've been confused about, as you guys have talked about, why you made some of the changes you made, Representative Howe, is I think I've heard it referred or referenced a couple of times that you came in underneath the governor's recommendation, but yet when I look at the blue sheet that we were handed out, it appears that you came in $29 million over the governor's recommendation. What am I not seeing?
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Representative, the deletions were omitted from the subcommittee report, and so that number should look differently than it does.
I tried to do the fast math, and I couldn't even get that to work, but thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick points on student aid. I appreciate the conversation and certainly the addition of new money last year. But even with the new money added to student financial aid, Kansas ranks 45th out of 50 states for financial aid per FTE student. And regionally, we allocate about $142 per student. Colorado allocates $682, Oklahoma allocates $629, Missouri allocates $612, and Nebraska allocates $321. So just wanted to provide that for context. Thank you.
Representative Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Chairman Howe, we're under Board of Regents, the area we're talking about. Did you say number 5 and 6 were tied together?
Chairman Howe.
Yes, Representative, those are tied together.
So if we're deleting number 6, then we're deleting that same amount of money twice?
Chairman Howe.
Representative, item number 5 just, I guess, informs us of the deletion in order to add back in that base amount of $20 million with the addition of the money that goes to Washburn. So that's just under $1.8 million.
Representative Buchanan. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, we've been over here, Representative Buchanan and I've been discussing that a little bit. So I might need to ask staff for sure, if we leave the $5 million, or the number 5 in, and we also adopt my amendment, would we be deleting it twice? I think we might be. So I believe I might need to change my amendment to include deleting number 5 also, so that we don't double. My intention is not to delete 40 million. So I don't know if someone could, with staff, or Dylan's gone, but if you could ask Brianna or Jill.
They'll make the notation to make sure that it's not deleted twice.
Okay. All right. Good deal.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's a lot of discussion on this. My intention, I know this has been added in several times. Every year, there's another line item for this student financial aid. I just think if we're going to do it, let's move it into the comprehensive grant, and then that. I did this also to free up some money for cybersecurity. So with that, I move my amendment.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then I'll move to number 8, which is the language for the comprehensive grant. Yeah, if Jill can hand out my proposed amendment to number 8. So if you guys remember last year, we added $19 million to the comprehensive grant. The Board of Regents took a different policy than what I think our intentions were, and what has always been the policy is to share that money basically on a 50-50 split with private and independent institutions. So they took the new money and they distribute it differently than the old money. Number 8, what it did was to try to fix that gap going forward, and saying, okay, well, since the public's got a little bit more money last year, the intention was it to be split evenly. We're going to give a little bit more to the privates this year in order to make that to even that up, and then in 25 it would be 50-50 split. The problem is that in doing that, what we are going to for about 4.5 million, we're going to short the public institutions about 4.5 million in already pledged scholarships. So what I did in my motion, and it would be for 24 and 25, because we have to continue this for 3 years, basically, for the next 3 years in order to take care of those already pledged scholarships. It would say that the 35 million, it's 35.3 million, would be split the way that it's always been split going back to the year, fiscal year 2022. But I'm adding 4.5 million to be distributed, and you see the language, it would be distributed just to the state educational institutions within the comprehensive grant, but it would be there to fulfill their obligations that they've already made to those students. And so I've talked to independents, I've talked to Board of Regents, I've talked to some of the different schools. Everybody feels like this would fix the problem, and now, this does not add any additional money to the comprehensive grant except for the 4.5 million, and that 4.5 million would just be for basically scholarships that had already been given. So, I mean, I guess we wanted to have some more discussion on whether to add a little bit more to that comprehensive grant. We can, but this is my motion at this point to replace number 8 with my proposed amendment.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Woodard? Oh, Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Since we were moving to 8, all right. I'm on the mic. All right, I'll speak a little bit louder. All right, I think if we look at this, so you're deviating from 8 in that it says no less than 22.5 would be distributed to private and independent. But you're saying we have a commitment already, so we have to give them more than 22.5. Am I correct?
Representative Hoffman.
Well, no, the 22.5 would go to the private independent institutions under number 8.
Yes.
And basically, and I know this was not the intention of the committee, but because what they did in number 8 and then what they did in following 2025, they actually would set the independent colleges up for the same cliff as what we set up the cliff for the public. So what I'm trying to do is to the 35.3 million, which is what is in the comprehensive grant, would be split the same way it's always been split back in 2023. In order to do that, because of what the Board of Regents did last year, I'm adding 4.5 that will be designated just to the public schools in order to make sure that they have the money that they promised, and then going forward, then the rest of it will be split. Does that hopefully make sense?
Representative Ballard.
Yes, it does, but maybe I'm just not clear. But if you're going to give a minimum of 22.5, then that leaves like 12.8.
Yeah, and
that could go to, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm taking that all out. All that language, number 8 is, I'm taking all that language out, and it's the new language will be what I'm adding.
So you're only adding 4.5.
Representative Hoffman.
Yes, but I'm also not giving more to the independent colleges in 2024. Because right now that's split like a 60-40, I think. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to get it back to where it was, because the independents got less last year.
Okay, I'm following you. I'm following you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to explain. Yeah, and so they're trying to give it to the independents to get them back up. The problem is, in 25, they went to a straight 50-50 split, which is what it was supposed to be. And then that created a cliff it creates a cliff in 24 for the publics, and in 25 it's going to create a cliff for the privates. So what I'm attempting to do with my amendment, and I've talked to Board of Regents, I've talked to independents, I think this fixes what we're trying to do.
I think I understand that now, because the comprehensive grant was really important on that end.
Yeah.
So I was trying to protect 6, but I really want to protect 8. So at this point, I think that's what you have done.
I hope so.
But it's complicated in how it's going to fall out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got a few questions. You're making up for the current scholarships for these are 4-year degrees, so you're making up for, is your intent to go forward after these 2 years with the same proviso for these students that are, or will these students just roll off in 25 and not have the assistance?
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, it would actually have to be, the same thing would have to be done in 26, but since 26 is not in our budget, then somebody will have to remind us that in 26, and I'm pretty sure they will.
And then as a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
You may.
So then there will be that many less degrees going forward for our Regents universities?
Representative Hoffman.
Or is your intent to forever add 4.5 million? Because when these students fall off, they won't be able to be replaced the way this is worded.
Right, but again, this is only for 24, 25. If we did the same thing in 26, that would fulfill those 4 years that those students have been made. Going forward from that, or at any time, even in 26 or even next year in 25, we could add more money to the comprehensive grant. I mean, we could make the 4.5 go on forever. It's just this will fix that cliff right now. It doesn't add more money. It doesn't add more shared money. Let's put it that way. It only adds the 4.5 to the comprehensive grant in order to take care of those scholarships that have been committed in 23.
Representative Tarwater.
That makes sense, but can you elaborate a little bit on why it needs to be a 50-50 split rather than assigned to the student, not unlike we're trying to do with K-12 going forward? My question is that stated because, I mean, you're on the Commerce Committee, and we just did a scholarship program for engineers, and there were like 1,700 graduates a year in the engineering programs in the regions, but only 30 in the private colleges. And so if you split the money 50-50, you're going to have about 6% of the population getting half of the grants, and the institutions that house the most students are only getting half the grants, which I think I like it better the way the regions did it, and maybe we should look at putting this off to Omnibus to consider it then to make sure that everybody's on the same page, but that's just a suggestion, sir.
Representative Hoffman.
Sure, and I understand. It's always just, I hate to say it, but it's always been done that way. I mean, that's the way that the comprehensive grant was done. It was always a split, 50-50. When we added the new money last year, I think most of us expected that would continue. It did not. The Board of Regents made the decision to change the new money to a different type of formula. They kept the old money at the same formula. So if we want to have that discussion, I think that would be great to have that discussion on how we want that to go forward. But I don't think we should say half of the money, which was 19.5, and the rest of it, which was, the rest of it was like 20 million or something like that, not quite 20 million, is split one way, the other is split the other way. So this puts it back to the way, all the money back to the way it was done in the past. If we want to have that discussion, I guess we could have that discussion of whether or not the other way is better, as far as how many the independents are graduating, how many the others the publics are graduating.
Representative Tarwater.
All right, thanks. If these are need-based scholarships, then I think that we need to focus on the student, not the institution. And if a lot of kids that have need-based aren't going to be able to afford a private college, most of them will end up at the state universities. And if only half of the grant money is available to those students, I would imagine they would get less of a grant and maybe not even go to college at all. So that's my concern here, is that we're leaving the student out of it, I think. But that's, again, my opinion. You've looked at this a lot more than I have, I'm sure. But I would think that we could at least talk about it again at Omnibus. Thanks.
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the discussion being had today because I think it really highlights the work we have yet to do in terms of need-based aid for our higher ed institutions. If I believe my history to be correct, in the late or mid to late 90s, there was 3 separate distinct scholarship programs administered by the state, and those were merged into one, which is now the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program. And yes, that tradition dates back to then, where it was divided more equally amongst all the parties involved. Just wanted to highlight some information for the committee. In fiscal year 2023, the public universities were able to award 43% of their eligible applicants, and the independent colleges were able to award 73%. There is a maximum amount that you can award a student per year. In the public institutions, it's $4,000. In the independent institutions, it's $10,000. So there's a little bit of a disparity, if you will, in those amounts per awarded per year. So just wanted to give that background information.
Any further questions in regards to the motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Hoffman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one more. This one might be easier, might not be. Under the very last page, number 5, under the community and technical colleges, the committee added $10.5 million SGF to operations for technical colleges and Washburn Institute for Technology for 2024. My understanding is that would be split evenly among all of those technical colleges. I think that might be a little bit of an issue. All those technical colleges are not equal. I mean, some of them have more, some of them have less. I think there's a lot more that needs to be fleshed out on this particular one before we just give $10.5 million. So I would move that we take number 5 and move it to omnibus. Delete it and take it and move it to omnibus.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close. Oh, Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate that, but this is for 7. The 7 technical schools. They came with a huge request. And so what this is, because of some of the investment that we have made as a state and some of the big folks, the big companies that are coming into the state, what this does, this helps them ramp up because they're being asked to help train some of these new employees that are coming. So this is a compromise to come up with this for 1 year to help and then to come back in a year with how they're going to move forward, what they're going to want from the state, how they're doing things, because they're different than community colleges. So while I appreciate it, I think, again, we as a legislature have been very supportive of these technical colleges and what they're doing. And I think, again, because we didn't have much discussion on it, this was a compromise kind of from all parties and from what, they wanted over 20. And so we come, to this, $3 million each, 21, so that's where we are. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me at least make that explanation.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, now you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm almost afraid to start this conversation with such a short amount of time, but I want to be clear that I don't sit on higher education budget committee, and so I know you guys are constantly tasked with making very challenging decisions in a very complex situation. However, I just happened to pull up the enrollment numbers for the last 5 years. And when we look at enrollment over the last 5 years in our state universities, that equates to, thus far, a 9.2% decrease. Yet during that same period, and this includes all higher ed, yet during the same period, we've increased budgets 19%, or over $600 million. Now, again, not smartest person in the room by any stretch of the imagination, but generally when I have a lack of business coming into my business and I don't have the revenue coming in, I have to adjust my budget downward. Is there any discussion about this issue and adjusting these budgets the other direction instead of the proposed increases?
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this has come up in discussion, probably not in a global sense of all-encompassing every institution. I do know the Kansas Board of Regents had commissioned a study which would go through each institution and identify duplications in degree programs, certificate programs, and things like that. I haven't seen that report yet. I believe it's due out sometime yet this spring, but perhaps there's going to be some directives in that report back to the Board of Regents of how maybe we could realign our resources and perhaps not duplicate so many degree programs across our region institutions. So at least that's my hope, that the report would identify those things. I do know, for example, Emporia State University, for 18 years, there was a trend downward with on-campus enrollment. And so the new president has come in, done a top-to-bottom review, and really brought everybody in for a discussion, including the students. What are the students wanting? And so through that process, they have suspended over 80 majors, programs, certificate programs, things like that. They've reduced 47 FTEs. They've saved $5 million in expenses that would normally go to salary. And so they're realigning their resources that are provided to them from the state of Kansas and the taxpayers of this great state to position themselves to succeed. And they've come to our committee and have disclosed to us, because of these realignments, there's still a $10 million deficit. So I appreciate that openness that Emporia State has shared with our committee. I would like to see more institutions do that. Of course, I'm just in my first year as chairman, so I haven't had that opportunity, and I don't have that long view. Many other members do, but I do think you raise a great point. Right-sizing our institutions, elevating what is in demand and what is needed by our workforce. I think those are important discussions to have. So I appreciate you for bringing that up, and sorry for being long-winded, Mr. Chairman.
I won't say anything about that.
Thank you, Mr.
We are nearing the time for session. So if Representative Owens has anything that he would like to follow up with, it's going to have to wait until tomorrow at 9 a.m. And I also have Representative Tarwater and also Representative Landwehr as well. So I know those are the ones teed up. And Representative Woodard also actually had his hand up as well. So we will continue the discussion in regards to higher education for fiscal years 23, 24, and 25 tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So we are adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.